is part 3 of our AC3 generation retrospective. We're talking about Armored Core Nexus. This is Zealous here.
Nexus.
Tierson, already amped.
Nexus.
Armored Core Nexus. So those of you
Nexus.
who have played Nexus, you're probably very familiar with the blaring announcement we had for the opening in this game. This was kind of neat to see. Most of the well, I believe all the AC series up to this point, you had the title, you had the logo, you had the rest of the CG film to go along with things. They never had the blaring intro to introduce it, but here you had it with Nexus.
Yes, yes.
So,
Nexus. This was a good intro.
mhm,
Little side story for me. I was in college when this game came out, and
mm,
at the time I was in one of my 3D modeling classes, and for my final, I had to put together a complete 3D room. In which case, I created a bar, and on the TVs in the bar was the intro to Nexus that played through for the video.
oh man, the
Everybody was like, "What's that intro? What's up with that?" I'm like, "That's Armored Core Nexus."
in that very tone. Um, I think for some others in the community, I was in college at this point too, and this one was just a kind of cool transition. Some people would say, "Oh, it's a terrible transition because of what happened with the mechanics and how the function of parts would change." Period. But here we have it. Another expansion to Armored Core 3. This is coming after SL, and it's wow, a whole lot flipped.
This this is an expansion in the loosest sense of the word, though. I mean, a lot of this stuff is similar. I think they renamed all the parts,
Oh yeah,
and you cannot convert your save data. This,
big point.
there's a couple things. Let me start by saying I think Nexus overall is a pretty solid game. It's a lot of fun. It has so much going for it, but this is one of two things that I really don't like about the game. I mean, you're coming out of Silent Line, and like we said in Silent Line, I mean, here we have a game that just feels right for what it is. It feels so good and so right for what it is. And okay, all right, they change the engine. They make some key changes to it, and then you're coming out of this game that you really just enjoyed so much, and you can't bring your save. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a minor gripe, but it was just kind of like, but I love my saves so much. Can't Why can't I bring them over? It's not a big deal, but I mean,
Right.
you couldn't bring over the saves. You could bring over your emblem
Hmm.
as you could throughout the whole third gen. You can't bring over your save, and while it does still take place in the same world, um, that it really, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess
Yeah,
it is. I guess it is an expansion, but it's very different from what we're used to, at least at this point in the Armored Core series, as far as expansions.
definitely. And plus, you just look at the span of content we have here. I believe this was our second two-disc set for Armored Core, rather. The last time we had a double
Yes.
set was Master of the Arena. And with MOA, we had arena-centric, very arena-focused content. Here, for Nexus, we had an expanded disc. It was called Revolution. And the Revolution disc had a ton of nostalgic material loaded on it. Everything from old intros. This was AC1 through SL. You could watch, all the original series intros. You had
Yep.
soundtracks, like posters, promo advertisements, the art, the production art. I love this section. We've kind of hit on Mr. Kawamori and his designs, for the AC series, but it was really cool just to see his conceptual sketches, inside the game for once. And yeah, I mean, there were just a ton of little extras here. And to top it all off, you had a remix of the original Garage theme, Shape Memory Alloys, aptly named
Yes.
Shape Memory Alloys 2, the Revolution
Two.
Disc. The Revolution Disc was a blast to design to as a result. And the disc also had a number of missions to it. All these missions were redesigns of old missions we'd seen throughout the
Those missions.
the AC series. So yeah, it was a roulette. A lot from AC1. We had a lot from Project Phantasma, and other games. But you got a really short soundbite of information, just some short narration. Most of it was very
Yeah.
cryptic and abstract, like most of the AC series, and you got launched right into it. But yeah, had some real nostalgic figures appear. I believe in one mission you took on Phantasma, another you fought Valkyrie.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
list
okay.
goes on.
So we're gonna do Revolution
Yeah.
Disc first. Okay. All right. So yeah, Revolution Disc. For guys like us, is fucking awesome. This disc is great. In fact, we were talking about this before the show. The only thing that is missing is some kind of arena.
Yeah.
And I mean, I got through Evolution, and then I did Revolution, and then I rarely ever went back.
Hmm.
And it's all about the Revolution disc. You get all this old nostalgia stuff, and it's pretty cool. And by the way, we talked about the intro a little bit. Intro to Nexus is very good. In
Hmm.
fact, I'd probably even put it in the top three as far as the intros for all the games. Pretty close to AC3's intro, but not quite as good. It
Right.
definitely is a little bit prettier, but it doesn't tell a better story.
Definitely.
Um, okay, so you have Revolution, and it's funny because there are some classic, memorable missions in here, and they remake a mission or they extend a mission. Basically, they make it tougher. It's like a souped up version of the mission, but tougher for the player to do.
Hmm.
Or, and this was pretty cool, you actually take a reverse role. Now, you talked about that classic mission in Armored Core where you take on Valkyrie, which I
Hmm.
believe is the first time in Armored Core you actually fight another AC.
Hmm.
I maybe it was possible to go a different route, but I think this is the first time you get to fight one. And if it's not, it's one of the first ones. But
Hmm.
it's a classic one, it's a memorable one, and they put this on the Revolution disc remade. But then you also have the opportunity to take Valkyrie's spot. There's a reverse version of the mission where you play that role, and you're coming into the city to stop someone who's destroying the city. And so that was pretty
Yep.
cool. You had a handful of situations like that, but in Revolution was great. I'm not going to take anything away from it, but some of these missions was like, why did they remake this? What the hell was the point of this? I mean, this was like one of the first missions in Armored Core where you're just learning how to play, and you're not even
Yep.
sure what all your parts do. It's like, escort the truck across the bridge, and that's all it is. It's like, did I have to play that one again? I mean, out of all the missions you had, you remade this one, and in the particular one that I'm talking about, it does have a little bit of a backstory, which is fairly interesting. Like the truck that you helped get across the bridge actually ends up having some of the nasty bug things that you have to fight later on, and but still, I mean, there's so many classic missions in these games. The first series, Gen 1, that they could have picked, and it's like but they still pick some of these. And again,
Yep.
not to take anything away from it because it was just cool, but still, it was like, and they did get some classic ones in there, but
Hmm.
it was kind of weird. It was like, okay, what? All right,
Like I
that
guess I'll go along with it. I mean, I could say on one side there was one thing that they did very specific for a number of missions, and that's they had new remixes of a lot of the old themes.
mhm.
Like Another Age, Left Turn, remix of the AA opening. A number of themes, renamed Firework from AC2, Firework Circuit Edit, that was renamed. List goes on, and you could, listen to these two in the soundtrack listing section they had on this disc. But
I'd kind of lost and forgotten over time
mhm.
how much Armored Core was about its music. And I mean, obviously, you're more into that side of things than I am, Zealous. So I mean,
Mhm.
but I mean, really, Armored Core had a lot to do with its music. That was key for it,
Yep.
and that is brought to life with the Revolution disc. There's holy crap, how many songs did this game have?
You know,
Jesus, so many.
I didn't count, but there were plenty. That was the fun part about this. You had your remix tracks on the Revo disc, but you also had a new track for the original disc, the Evolution disc as well, and that totaled for quite an OST list. I remember I actually picked up the Nexus soundtrack before I actually got Nexus because the soundtrack was out first, and I noticed it was a multi-disc set. I said, "Oh, cool! It must be quite a few tracks here," and sure enough, there were. And just like the games were, or for the game itself, the tracks were divided into pretty much what you heard in Evolution Disc and what you heard in Revolution Disc. And I just dug both. The whole thing. In fact, I'm sitting here looking at it right now. Still got part of my collection there. But yeah, AC has had such strong foundations on its music, and it was nice. I think if there was any time to really jump back and I think take a retrospective at the soundtracks and where they come, it was here. We had AC2, things from AC3, so many original anthems that we come to know from AC, and having a number of these remixed was just really sharp. Being able to hear them again. Um, On top of that, it wasn't just the revolution in the remix music that pushed Nexus. It had a lot of originals of its own that still endure. A lot. In fact, they were remixed in the later releases. What was it? Autobahn 112 miles over, I think, something like that in one of the recent
Oh, I'm
releases.
not gonna remember that.
Yeah, Autobahn was remixed. I haven't heard a Shining remix. That was the intro to Nexus, but a number of these, Flood of a Life, those have all come up, and resurfaced in some fashion. So Nexus is really cool for that. It took a great retrospective, and it also took a great chance to introduce a new set of music to people. And here's another big thing about the new set of music we're talking about here. Nexus really got us closer to rock themes. Actual like kind of live style, instruments. With not to say we didn't have them before. We had some orchestral accompaniments and cool things like that. But drums, guitars, bass, electric, things like that. We started to get a lot of these tracks, and it kind of matched because Nexus was stepping into this, like grittier aspects, of gameplay and everything, and the way some of the mechanics changed. In fact, I think that was on the back of the case. Most realistic Armored Core yet. Or
Oh boy, here we go. Well, let's no, 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 no.
we'll
I'm
we'll
not gonna
stop there.
bite. I'm not gonna bite. We'll
Good,
talk
good.
about the gameplay after we talk about what evolution brings and
Right,
such.
right. But all these elements really just form together to make something unique here. And with the sheer amount of content, this was a nice part. Like there was plenty to enjoy and plenty to unlock. Both the discs you had here were not just standalones. Like, oh, I can really only play this disc, and that's all I need to look at. Like, no, I mean, there's still great unlocks you could do on both sides. Especially the ones that really came down to parts you could use. This was the beginning of I believe the Loris arms. These were remakes of Stinger's arms from his old AC back in Project Phantasma. And
But yeah, this is when we finally got the Stinger head,
yeah,
and we got all the Stinger parts.
sure did. We sure did. We got a whole set. So if you wanted to go cosplay a Stinger, there you go. But
Is
some
it cosplay? Is it really?
going
Is it
into this again,
cosplay?
yeah, your AC for your AC at least. But yeah, a few of these were standout, especially the arms. They were very good, um, and they remained faithful to the style. I think translating the style of those parts into a more modern game like Nexus ended up going over really well. And crossing discs to unlock this content was part of the whole thing. So getting the completion wasn't just about, well, I hit the arena, well, I hit these missions and this, and I'm done. No, there was plenty more here. Great replay factor if you weren't, busy playing. People are traveling to an event or doing something like that. So all of
Yeah.
that was here. Real gold. So panning away just a minute here. And so we're gonna want to move a little bit into revolution or evolution rather, and
Evolution for Nexus.
kind of preface, what we were looking at and what was happening a bit here. We we come into evolution. We kind of get a nice little expanded narrative once you start up the main campaign about just what's happening and where the forces are, and about how essentially war is just ongoing. The corporations Mirage, Crest are at one another's throats again. Kisaragi are still there in the middle of all of it, and Ravens are still being employed. We're introduced to a new group as Evolution starts up on Navis. Now, this is neat. They don't manufacture any parts. They don't make anything for ACs, but they're still a power in the world at this time, and they're really in between a rock and a hard spot. They have Mirage and Crest and Kisaragi around them, and they want to cater to some groups, and they don't, and they want to have their own
Right.
identity. They're in a really difficult position, and the first mission, basically, as we kick off, it starts off. It's I believe it's a move to help undermine those forces, but we start moving into that direction, and they set you in a very like world-like scenario. Like the moment you come in, we're introduced to our mailbox and everything again, and our new kind of consort or our new area that's going to handle at least the going-ons for your mercenary affairs. The Ravens Arc, and this is where we get introduced to this kind of these real-time newspaper clips is what I call them. We have world events that happen, and they come up in your mailbox. You can read about them if you want as they happen, but they point to different things that are happening, out in the world. Um, and this is it's neat too because while you might say, it's just aesthetics, it's just fluff, blow past it. Well, you have some choice here in Nexus. There's you have some branching paths. that you can take. There is not simply one set line that you must take only and just head to the end. There's a number of missions, and actually part of the challenge is the order you got to do some missions to unlock the ones you're after. And I felt playing through Nexus, there was always a mission that popped up that I hadn't seen before. Like, oh, I had to play this through this order to actually unlock that.
Mm,
Um, though the game was rife with things like that and little things that would come up, and it was even better when you ran into a mission where you could unlock a part or something that came up.
mm.
Um, so you went through. There's you're doing your unlocks. You do have your arena. The arena felt more incorporated. The arena was always there for AC, but instead of being something you did, well, let me go grab some more credits or do this, it was more of a direct part of the game. That is an event, a major event that would change, or something that would happen. There'd be an update to an arena posting, or if a pilot made a certain action, they'd be removed from the arena, things like that, and you saw the rank shift. Not to say you didn't see the rank shift before. This happened even all the way back like AC2. You killed a certain pilot and they're out of the rankings. But Nexus just did it in a more dynamic way. It felt like they tried to weave that into the story a little
Right.
more. So
Overall, you get a big upgrade in the storytelling in Nexus.
you do, you do, and I think one of the major indicators of that too was just how the corporations, I think, interacted with players. Instead of just saying, "Oh, hey, here's a new part. We hope you do this, etc." You still had that, but we had direct, non-playables that became part of this whole loop. The biggest controversies, some of the biggest ones that came up in Nexus, was the Crest and their essential legal recruiting. Um, Basically, the corporations were not meant to have pilots that mercenaries that piloted specifically for them. They were still meant to be under free contract, and if you engaged in those kind of things, you were going to be ousted. Um, our intro AC, Evangel's AC Oracle, he was booted because of talk of this exact activity. But we had two others that would become major focal points. We had Genobi and Agria. And Genobi, I should say, was really odd. I mean,
Shinobi.
I thought he was an AI at first, just because of how nonchalant he was. Who knows? Maybe he actually was, but he was a Crest specific pilot, and he ended up coming up in your story a lot. He came up for an arena test, and then there was a couple of other events down the road, and then we had Agria, who would later become Zenaida for Last Raven. Change her whole identity and everything, but the same for her. She was a Crest specific pilot, and this whole drama, just kind of unfolded at different points, and you were pulled directly into some things. You encountered them multiple times. Some would just wanted to test how powerful you were, like we haven't seen that before, and or just for other instances like that. But yeah, your mission path, your some of your decisions, the way you pick those things would have an impact as to which order you would run into certain things or what you would encounter going through the game and unlocking parts and kind of piecing things together. So
This
the
guy, he loves his Armored Core lore. I don't. I get lost in this. I'm like, well, I don't care. I don't care. I'm here to kill shit. Are you the boss? Are you the last boss? No, I don't care then. Whatever.
get out of here, whatever.
Yeah,
Oh man.
just my next step to more money.
But
Actually, you're my next step to getting out of the story mode of this and getting into the end game of Armored Core.
that's where we're going with it. But
So
it's funny, all this laid the foundations for Last Raven eventually. We also had Jacko make his first appearances and pop up, and a lot of these pilots that you meet in Nexus, you would see them again in Last Raven in some form or another, or they represented a certain faction, or they were going to mean more of the story. Um,
there's definitely a shift here from blah blah blah. There is definitely a shift here from software. There, okay, I knew I was saying that
you
right.
got it.
Okay, when it comes to okay, they're actually trying to build some lore. They're trying to build some story. This matters a bit. We saw this a little bit in the past, but not too much. They're really trying to flesh out a world with characters, and ironically, just to destroy it. But they're trying this out, and I think they're really seeing that. And we'll talk about this more in a little bit, but I mean, Nexus for anything, it is great for many ways, but you're really starting to see the seeds of what's going to happen with Gen 4 and Gen 5.
Yeah.
You really start to see some directions that they're thinking about taking Armored Core in, and I think with this directly, they're really trying to give you some passionate characters in this world. And I think that part of that is okay. Well, we want to try to hook people in with these characters. We want to make them care, and I believe at this point they're trying to span out into other media a little bit,
Hmm.
or they're at least thinking about it. And I think that all goes together. And I think what we're seeing here is we're starting to see the seeds of what comes to my favorite AC, White Glint, and trying to put together a character that the fans of the series can really care about. Although we already had it, but they're really just I think we're just starting to see that. I mean, there's other things as well, and we'll bring that up, but
Yeah.
we're not quite to the gameplay yet. So
Right. Yeah, the mechanics will be at the heart of things, obviously, because there were a ton of very important changes, for Nexus as we got there. But starting to look at the role not just the characters played, but the corporations played, the different parts you saw released. We had our a good expansion of like cores and things like that for during Silent Line, but coming into Nexus, we had a really cool expansion of parts here. Even the smallest parts manufacturer, Kisaragi, really stepped up. Now, like Belena in the past, like AC2, being a small group, you'd see FCS releases or maybe the occasional extension design or something else cutting edge. But this was pretty slick. Kisaragi actually made they had their own core in this game. The Rakan, however you'd like to pronounce that. It was an OB core that didn't have any type of interception or any hangers, but pretty solid stats for a relatively light core. It had a really odd design too. It was rounded but symmetrical in a way too, and this was neat to see. I think the smallest group start to manufacture major frame parts like that. I kind of wish I could have seen more. I was crazy about Kisaragi as it was, but yeah, you had your smallest manufacturer start to produce parts like this. You had some other really cool new categories that came out. Period. Besides the main um, types of parts being expanded upon. I think one of those categories, and we were talking about this a little bit before the show, was the rail cannon. We'd see this later throughout the series as we go in Last Raven, AC4. That we'll keep seeing this.
it's funny that you say that because Kisaragi, which didn't have many parts in the past, canceled one of their parts, and that you just kind of touched on it right there. I do believe this is the first Armored Core that takes parts away from the game, and we see this in a few
Mm,
cases. The first and biggest of that is Op Intensify
mm.
is gone. This is for many players, this is a landmark game because Op Intensify Humans Plus now a dead debate. It's gone. They get rid of it. From makes a bold statement with this, saying, you know what? Okay, this was fun for what it was, but we're gonna yank it from the game,
Yep.
and so it becomes the first game without Op Intensify. Although it's still able to be used by AI ACs,
Oh yeah.
it's still there, but players will not get. They will not get this back. So at the same time, the Crow extensions gone.
Gone.
They throw those out of the game as well. And I really, this is a big thing. This is
Hmm.
the first time they take parts away, and again, this is what makes it a very different expansion than from all the others in the past. And I mean, I've talked about this in the past.
Hmm.
I'm not a fan of I'm not a fan of taking things away. You've put it in this game. It's something that fans are thinking about. There's no, you shouldn't remove it. If you got to change it, change it.
Hmm.
But don't be yanking stuff from the game. That's kind of silly, especially when it's an expansion.
For sure. And on top of actually, taking some parts straight out, the heavy modifications some went through were just unbelievable. A main case, I think, to highlight here is the plight of the chain gun. And a number of the machine guns.
Hmm.
There's an inside joke. A lot of people call it the chain gun the clip gun because it's basically what it did. They heavily changed the firing stream. It became very erratic. It fired on a limited clip. It kind of defeats the purpose of a chain gun, and it was just general blow. The CNG 300 had been an extremely powerful back part for AC3 and SL. Heck, even in
Hmm.
past Armored Cores, the chain gun was always well respected. But here, it was just hurting. In fact, it's crazy. The part went from superstar to just dying off. I mean, I can think of only ever a handful of designs through design sections that would equip this, or perhaps for an aesthetic or use it, but they just took such a severe blow. Also, MG800, you can have the part looking the same, but anything that was really out of control in rapid fire before was heavily capped.
Hmm.
These
Well, yeah, I mean
most
they made
things.
changes. They made changes to this. They made dramatic changes to the guns.
Hmm.
Where we said in Silent Line, your left-handed weapons and your right-handed weapons, they were different. Now they're meshing them all up.
Yep.
And while you still have some exclusive left and rights, you've got a bunch that are on both. And when it comes to this, there's also a huge change to weapons in general. I believe this
Hmm.
was just solid ones. Actually, I don't think this was the case for energy, but this was biggest seen on machine guns and such. Is that now we have magazines,
Yep.
and this will mean basically, all right, you can shoot your gun so many times before it has to reload. And this was kind of weird because you could not control how it reloads. It's just going to reload once that magazine's empty.
Right, right. Which is exactly what I was mentioning about, the tap into the chain gun, being put on a clip. Same idea. Those changes along with meshing the weapons to work with the new mechanics, as we go into it, the way, heat had changed and things like that, this was quite dramatic. And I think it had an impact about all parts. So this was really a time to step back, okay, and look a second. Like your your very design from SL or the exact same thing you were using, this might not fit in a certain context. You really had to sit back and look at the fundamentals of your design, what was happening with weapons, because most of them were functioning differently. Let's also look at another classic weapon in Armored Core, the grenade launcher. It even underwent some heavy changes here. Now, we went down from 15 to 12 rounds for one thing, and also it got a massively longer reload to it. Now, on the good side, here's the deal. I really didn't think this was a killer or a nerf for it. The weapon changed. It got a heck of a lot more velocity. Still had an enormous contact surface to it, so still an accurate weapon to deal with. It was still very usable, but just not as rapid fire like spammable. Rapid grenades. What am I saying? You're not a massive MT. It wasn't the
There.
the reload rate wasn't as intense as it was in Silent Line in AC3 and some of the games before, but still usable. Just the way the weapon function had changed. And this was across the board for a lot of things. So I know one thing I enjoyed just getting hands on with Nexus. I started to play it was checking out just the weapons. Period. Like just starting with the bare bones. Like what are
Mhm.
handguns now? What are machine guns now? What are laser cannons now? Like what do all these mean to the game? And like how are they going to connect with what I want to do with my design? This was the time to step back and do it. So,
Right, right. Well, and now with that as well is, ironically, you're saying let's take a look at what the weapons are. Well, weapons now look different, and this is when we get the introduction to being able to change weapons colors.
yes, 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 yes. Fans had clamored about this for years, and a great point to bring up. You know, um, we had our weapons just kind of on the side, and we were, going through our paint, doing our colors, and you'd always let out that big sigh. It's like, Dad, gummit, I just want to color my rifle, or I just want to color that back part. Well, now you could. It wasn't as we didn't have as many options as we do today. With the direct shades and everything, but now you were allowed to at least color your weapons. And for an aesthetic sense, sweet. Thank you.
Yes.
We're finally getting the ability to blend our weapons a little more with what we have in our design, and this was very well received.
Hmm.
One of the
Oh yeah,
things,
I mean it was Jesus. That took
yeah,
forever.
it
Was
did
there was no good reason why this took so long. None.
exactly.
Again, and yes, I'm not talking to my ass on this. I mean, I worked in this kind of stuff. I worked in digital design and 3D modeling and rendering and creating skins for these kind of things. There was no good reason this took so long.
And it's just such an irony. A game like Armored Core that's all about customization, all about creating something that would reflect your playstyle, your design choices and preferences. I mean, you would think, well, weapon color would just go right along with that. You can color the
Right.
rest of your AC. So finally, that was a really great change in the garage. If I recall, the emblem system though, there weren't huge changes to that. That was still
Was
pretty.
there any?
I don't think I. I mean, that's something that was pretty much along the lines of what we'd always seen. You could import your old emblem if you want. You could port that in and port that over, but otherwise, you didn't have huge changes in that department. But
I think the functionality as far as like how it actually interacted with the game, I think that was the same. But as far as interacting with it as a player, this is looking like um, a new OS
yeah,
for it. So yeah, there's definitely. I'm looking at it right now, so it
yeah,
does look a little bit different from what we had in the past. But functionally, this was
right.
this was the same.
And you can say that in general. Nexus did some tidying work just around the house. With just a few of the visuals. Some of the menus, some of like the displays and the
Oh
loading
yeah,
screens.
the menu system for Nexus is gorgeous. I mean,
It
you had
is.
literally the same thing for AC3 and Silent Line. This is a beautiful operating system for playing the game.
Yeah, just starting at the simplest way to define this. We finally moved away from the kind of like kind of dry orange kind of sunset theme colors that we'd gotten used to for AC3 and SL, and here we kind of transfer into a really just kind of sedated blue. But this kind of it really permeates all of the menus, right? I mean, they changed the assembly selection, the way your ACs line up, in your garage.
Hmm.
I mean, you can have and all that kind of thing where your shop and where all that's sitting. But it worked. It was functional. I know some players complained of a bit of lag when you're in your garage, and I think that's the case. It's funny you can see this, and I kind of wonder what they have going on graphically because you go in your garage, and as you scroll through parts, you'll notice a bit of a frame rate cut. It's
Yeah.
not anything to crash you, but that surprised me for an AC game. Like, wow, I'm cutting frames in the garage. It's
Well,
yeah,
in this again, we're talking about trends, and
yeah,
this is a trend that I think would continue throughout the rest of Gen 3, and actually, you even see it a bit more in Verdict Day. There's
yeah,
your garage area is a little laggy too, and annoyingly so. This has almost become a staple for the series
yeah.
at this point. So, but yeah, definitely, it's slower, but it's worth it.
It is.
And there was nothing wrong with the AC3 and Silent Line menu. Um, but this took it up a notch.
It did, and I think another thing we'd gotten used to was the circular design for our select. I mean, we've had this in AC1 series, AC2, the beginning of AC3, how you'd come out into a main menu and you'd be able to go around the wheel and select the major part you want. Well, here in Nexus, you came into your main menu when you loaded up and you had the world map and you really had your garage and everything to the right and things were in a row and they were via symbols more instead of
Hmm.
fully spelled out text, which was neat, and that really compacted the whole like navigation in a way. And you
This
could,
is again,
yeah,
we have seeds for the future here. I mean, that is exactly what Five and Verdict Day is.
yep,
Well,
precisely,
not exactly, but pretty close. You
yeah,
can definitely see similarities.
definitely. And all these things really just came together, weren't just representative of what we would see to come, but also what we had here in this just trend change for AC. Now, it was neat when you went back to Revolution Disc. There was a bit of a throwback because some of the menus were similar, at least how you got through your garage navigation and everything else. But for the main menu, it was just a lot. It was a lot. You had a lot more freedom as far as what you could select in the map. It felt like, oh, this is almost like Command and Conquer style, except I'm not select, click, and dragging units and then where to go.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, all these things I think really made for a fun nav. It was nice to see it updated. I know one thing I always like to see with AC is how the displays would change, and everything just kind of felt just generally a little sharper here, which was cool because it just matched the whole aesthetic and everything we went into.
So, another one of the big changes that would come with Nexus, we saw a little bit of this in Silent Line, at least as far as giving us different variations of things. Although, ironically, we wouldn't get this with weapons right away. Nexus brought in part tuning. It
Hmm.
brought in the ability to alter the parts and tune them better to how we would like them.
Yeah, this was one that was really really welcome, and it really came in line with kind of making your design feel like your own. You were given 10 tuning points per part, and you could tune your frames, and you could tune, I believe, your generator, your radiator, your booster. Um, all the categories weren't just free range here. You couldn't start messing with some of the things that we can today. As we have different arm parts, for the firing stability and everything, or accuracy tunes. It wasn't that specific yet. It was mainly like weight, energy drain. Depending on the function of the part, such as like for the generator, this is the one a lot of people mess with, like your obviously your energy, messing with the outputs of that, like how much space you had. For boosters, you could tone down the heat a bit. Later you could crank up your booster excel or the power, things like that. But it gave you some options at least. I know it was very useful for legs because you could get more weight cap, which was pretty handy. And
Hmm.
for other things, you could tweak down the weight. Maybe there was that part you were like 50 over, and it's like, oh crud, I can't equip that. Well, with tuning, you could turn your weight down enough to where you could get everything in you wanted. So this allowed for much tighter management of, like, I think, design and what parts you could fit. Whereas in the past, you'd instantly be overweight the moment you pick that frame part that was just too heavy. You have to make another choice or take something off your design. But not here. A lot more choices, and you just had some more control over what you could do to your design. Cool, cool
Yeah,
feature.
yeah, no, it's pretty nice. Allowed you to get that little bit of tweak, and this is something that, again, this is something that would stick around. And
Yeah.
I think one thing that was annoying though was that you had to pay for retuning.
Yeah, you did. Good point. When you did your retuning and reset, you had to pay to get your swap overs. Fortunately, this was undone later as they
Hmm.
recognized players are going to want to retune their stuff. Give them the freedom to do it, and just let us have that as just a static ability. But for what we had here, it was the beginning of the system. It worked. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad this element has endured. Being able to put some of your own spin on a part, no matter how small, is just a really, really cool addition. In terms of like using the tunes though, or how they came into effect, again, for the booster radiator generator, I felt this is where they were most effective. I know I tended to use my tunes in like about a 6:4 ratio, usually like about six in the thing I really wanted to enhance the most, and then four in the substat. For I think the only radical cases were like for legs, where I'd focus more on weight cap or something else. But
Hmm.
some good control here, and especially to control your freaking heat, or where you're sitting. If you were running a little too hot, this might be a way to tweak down and kind of fit the things you want in your design. So,
Help your radiator.
radiators, they were everywhere.
So yeah, there was tuning introduced, which was a big part of the game as well. Well,
Um,
okay, so let's go into some of the other things. I
yep.
mean, okay, so again, taking things away, which is a theme in Nexus.
Hmm.
Weapon breaking gone,
Yep. Out of
which
here.
is really weird because it comes back, or at least part breaking comes back.
Yep.
So, or I guess makes an introduction, but weapon breaking gone, weapon pickup gone.
Hmm.
Um, and this is the first one where we don't have crazy sized FCSs. Again, this is a bit of a
Yeah.
precursor to Gen 5. FCSs get reduced drastically,
Hmm.
and they'll stay this way for the remainder of Gen 3. And then obviously in Gen 4, you're like, what's an
Yeah.
FCS? Because they're so freaking big that that
Yeah.
doesn't much matter. So, and then again, more precursor to Gen 5 is the FCSs were reduced, but so was your overall no, I guess saying mobility would be the wrong word, but
Mm.
generators and radiators go through a drastic change. And this,
Yes. Yes.
you can't just. I suppose it's possible to build an AC that can just fly around however it wants, but if you want to be constantly mobile, you're really going to pay for it.
Yeah.
You're going to have crappy boosters. You're not going to be able to, create a lot of heat. A super fast AC is going to pay for it. And, overall, I, I guess you could say you're grounded more like you are
Mm.
in 5, but it kind of the same difference in that respect. But we're looking at a reduction in being able to fly around and be, crazy super in the air, super AC.
Yeah, there's a lot that happened here, especially a lot that you just highlighted here. Um, One thing I want to just take a moment on is the FCSs. And this is neat. This was more evidence of why coming into Nexus, it was just so wise to just stop a moment and just really look at the way this stuff functioned. Uh, a very popular FCS from SL was the SRA 2 from Kisaragi. It was the wide small lock, but really balanced. You could use it with missiles, machine guns, everything else. And due to its lock type, you had a really wide box, and it just fit everything well. Well, it does the same thing in Nexus. Like, functionally, it works the same, but when you actually apply it, you'll see that drastic change in your lockbox window. You're not covering most of the screen.
Yeah.
Some of your speeds may be a little different, so it's that part of it is a little different. So it's definitely not just a slapstick and go ahead and run ahead what you have. Um, as a result, all around, regardless of what FCS you use, there was definitely more attention that had to be paid to your tracking
Hmm.
and ensuring you would keep your opponent in your lock long enough for a double lock. It's very important with cannons, especially. Or you knew how to balance your window enough to kind of guide your targets around. So I think this was a kind of clarion call here to just up skill in general and just up your ability to lock. In addition to that, as we're kind of touching on your management skills, managing your energy. Most importantly, the biggest thing that people usually look at for Nexus, managing your heat.
Too much.
So much. This probably mechanically the largest change that happened for Nexus.
And they'll take this back immediately. They'll see it in
Yeah,
Ninebreaker that they're like, okay, yeah, we went too far.
yeah.
Sorry guys, our bad.
So here's the deal: you're coming out of Silent Line with just so much freedom, flight and a mega powerful generator available. The Raz, plenty of room to maneuver, plenty of room to do whatever you're after, and then you come here and things have really scaled back, and now a very sound combination between your booster, your generator, and your radiator is absolutely critical to your AC success. And this really comes down to not just how energy work, but how heat function. The calorific value for a generator was something I think a lot of fans just kind of tended to ignore, just speed bumped over in the past. Like it was there, and it had function to a minor degree, but this is the game where you'd really feel it. Um, your calorific output of your generator, your heat your boosters produced, and the cooling ability of your radiator really formed a sync, a pattern together. And if you had one of those elements that was really just way too radical or out of control, you were going to have problems with your heat. And this was very noticeable with, oh, I just want this booster and this and this. And you go out into your first mission and you fry yourself alive just
Right,
from
right.
boosting.
It was too much. And I know that a lot of people loved this change.
Yeah.
I was not one of them. I thought they went too far, and I was so glad that From agreed. And because you saw that in Nine Breaker, they scaled it back a bit.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of fans really liked how this
Yeah.
function worked and this mechanic worked in the game. And I was like, are you on crack? What do you like about it? And this comes down to play style, I think, more than anything. But it was interesting to note it and to see, it really put a spotlight on what some people are really liking about Armored
Yeah.
Core. And some people are like, okay, this is just kind of a pain in my ass. All right, just let me find a good radiator to put on there and just be done with it. Where
So,
others really like the mechanic of having to balance this out, and
oh,
you
yeah.
know, so very interesting in that regard.
Definitely, and I think some of the hottest talk in the community around this time was, okay, what's going to be the metagame for these? Coming up with good combinations. Hey, post up your results. Like, what combinations have you found work well? And that just come together and that sync up well. You had a lot of different experimentation that was happening with. It was, to be honest, it was a joy to read the forums during this time. You had people, actively testing designs, some burning themselves to death. Some coming up with things that, um, were efficient, maybe not the speed they wanted, or were speedy but not the efficiency they wanted. Eventually things were kind of crafted out. I know the we had some real champions come out of this. The G91 generator, while no RAS, became a very popular choice due to its high energy output and good cap, as well as not insane calorific value, but it was on the money. Um, the Ananda radiator became really popular. It was just a good balance of cooling, force cooling. It could support a number of combinations. And boosters that could still be played with. You had people that loved the fastest, the TP slash the fleets. Later you had Vulture 2, Birdie 2, Gull. Gull was really a hot booster. You had to use different combos with that.
That's the one I used.
Nice, but it had great power. And if I
Yeah.
remember, Gull worked really well with Fudo. Fudo was a heavy generator near the G91 that cost like it was like 2506 in terms of the calorific value.
Actually, I used. I'm looking at it right now. I used
Yeah,
Gull with Lotus, and then I used the Linden radiator because that thing
yeah. There you
thing was
go.
a beast. So I mean, I burned, but I never burned for long, and it got to the point where I just didn't really have to worry about it.
See, and that's the cool part too. as Tierce is mentioning here, the Lotus, all these other parts. This is where we had a push for other generators, radiators, combinations to be usable. I think people
Hmm.
just felt before, well, ROS, duh, like that's what you put
Right.
on, and now you really had to curtail your combination, your design. It's like, well, I really like Fudo because of the low calorific value. Okay, but that's going to put me overweight. What's my combo to use instead? And usually the Lotus was a really popular generator for that. So a lot of different booster generator radiator combos coming out during this time. Players went through a lot of change with this, both for design and playstyle, and just coming up with something they felt could represent them. We also had people that went to the extreme, and the exciting part is we got to see this just done in a live setting. Armored Core Midwest Mayhem 3, held in
Ah,
Janesville, Wisconsin,
ACMM3.
for the Armored Core Nexus regional tournament for the Midwest. It the main
I meant
event.
yours. I meant yours.
What, ACMA?
Yeah.
That was for Ninebreaker. That comes later.
Oh,
I want to.
okay.
I'm focusing on this one because something very important for Nexus happened here, and this was my first
Yes.
time seeing this. We had the winning design for the main tournament, the main event of the day, ran what was called backdoor cooling design, and by backdoor cooling, it literally ran the extreme. The design burned. Okay, it got itself set on fire because it had very terrible normal cooling. But here was the catch: it had really, really powerful force cooling and enough of a balance to keep its energy up. Now, this was important. In Nexus, when you went into a burn, it wasn't just your AP that got set on fire like in the past. Your energy would actually start to drain. And this is what was crippling for so many players. If you went into a heavy burn, you not only had an energy drain, but your AP burned as well. This design really combined the most dangerous side of like the heat world. That is, you would keep yourself in a flame, but your force cooling would be running so high that it almost negated the factor. So regardless of what you'd run into, you could ensure you had a wall of very high cooling. You had a generator that should be able to catch you, and if you needed the backups, you had the energy extensions, I believe the Gerans, to help kick you back up again if you ran into problems. Um, so really, anything that tried to really lock down the design hard with yeah, certain types of heat, or at least the level it got used to, it was successful against. It couldn't stop it because it ran at a certain cooling. Um, I thought this was neat to see a design to really skate on a mechanic this closely, and to see it played at a competitive level and really push like this. It wasn't invincible. There were tiers of heat you could hit where you could just turn this thing into just slag and just melt it to nothing. It was still
Slag.
it was still very possible, but yeah, the design, it was a choice for our winning player, and there were a lot of neat things that came out of this. There were some people that also attempted to use hover boosters and snipers. Baker was there that day with that. He would fly up high, get the worm sniper rifle, which was very powerful for Nexus, and hit hard, and basically just sit high and pick away at opponents. And
Hmm.
all kinds of play styles and options opened up here. And I guess the irony of this was the only AC game from the older generations where I felt I didn't have a steady staple. I had two designs that I really really enjoyed,
Oh, what
but
he really means is that he couldn't find an AC build to cover how much he sucked.
dun dun dun, busted.
Ah!
But the design I really enjoyed. It was actually a Racken quad. I entered this, and I think we had a quad design contest back on A3C. But yeah, I ended up with the quad. Had all the bells and whistles, back units, extensions. Left and right, left arm mini grenade launcher, and had a really ended up having a good time with it. And not quite where I wanted to be for a staple, but enjoyed it nonetheless. So I mean, here you have it. All these new mechanics, all these new playstyles
Oh,
laid
no, no.
out,
See,
and
I knew you were going to do this. I knew you were going to do this. You were going to forget.
I'm leaving you a segue, my good man.
No, no, no. You don't need a segue. All right.
Go ahead. No,
All right, you know what you forgot? I've been sitting here waiting for a time to bring them up, and I know that there's probably people listening like, I can't believe they haven't said this yet. This is probably, and again, this is a precursor to Gen 5, at least as far as how weaponry would be handled. Nexus brings in probably one of the more significant changes that we see in Gen 3, the adaptation to hangers.
yep. Left you room. The hanger part of the core. Now, these were awesome. I think a common wish list for a lot of players is, well, shoot, I don't have enough ammo to get through what I'm doing. I wish I had an extra gun. I wish I could pack a blade. Yeah, I wish there was
Hmm.
some other way. Well, here you had it. Um, a really, really, really cool feature that we had on cores, and what it allowed you to do was to essentially store a weapon. Now, there were weapons that were hanger able. There were weapons that were not. I mean, you couldn't just go pack a carousel in your core.
Right.
It wouldn't make any sense. But a number of the small arms, the small machine guns, the small handguns, the blades, the pocket blade was a cool option, I always thought. Um, Really cool way to implement said parts without, harping on you all day with hardcore drain and everything. You could keep a small arm on your AC, and I love this. This was something that was only going to get better, as LR hit, as different, parts changed, and um, you know, look at Verdict day to day. We've taken this to its extreme. You have your, your hanger sits outside, your AC
Right.
now, but this is where this whole mechanic began, of
Right.
storable weapons. And a really cool addition to core function we already have. So, I mean, look at this here. We started off with AC with the normal core, and we build with AC2 into the overboost core. We go further with that, we get the exceed orbit core, the EO. So now we have distinct divisions, and now we're getting hangers. And if you want to, top it off with the other bell and whistle we always get, that's the cams, the missile interception system. So
Hmm.
there's a lot cores can do at this point. And I mean, some of these, these multi functions came into play in a really cool way. I know, Tierson, one of your favorite EO cores from Crest, was a solid that also had,
Yes.
missile interception on it. And cores were just a lot of fun at this point. It felt like it wasn't as much I'm attaching this part due to how it's a centerpiece from AC and the, what it does, but now you're actually looking at the function.
Serious
Okay,
function and
yeah,
multiple functions on cores, or you would find a few. There were some cores that really only had one function, but it
hmm
did it really well.
exactly. So here the options are. Later on as well, you'd see this really come down the pike with the hanger only cores that would have a lot of crazy stats, really good base stats, but you'd have no OB or no EO on it. So options, options abound. And picking a core, I felt became more about that step. How else am I going to better augment my AC? What's going to match the
Hmm.
playstyle more? What else am I after? So huge,
And
awesome addition.
it is cool because I mean, Armored Core really takes on the title with this,
It
and
does.
yeah, you could base an AC on the core, and complement and have all the parts complement each other, or not. It came down to gameplay. It came down to how you optimize how you play with your AC. But yeah, like just basically kind of copying what Zealous here said. It's your core can really matter here, and they're
Hmm
really doing a lot of cool things more than ever before. So it's kind of cool where yeah, they took some stuff away with Nexus, but they're
Yeah,
they're giving us some new stuff, and they're making some things matter more than they ever have.
definitely. So, we're given these new tools, we're given these new functions. Also, we hit on a little bit earlier too, but in terms of weapons, what we were given, another brand new category of weapon we were given was the micro missile. Missiles, it's steadily evolved during the series. At this point, we've had the multi missile and the mid and the small missiles. Where here's another one. These were particularly exciting because, well, for one thing, they were in the intro. Evangel used them near the end, along with micro missile extensions, to shoot a large swarm of missiles. And being able to pack a missile swarm in your AC, for some people, this was a big deal, especially for those who love to run missile jukeboxes all day long. For most really large swarms or consistent swarms, a lot of those required, beefy dual back units or your extensions and everything. And you could get your multi-locks and others, but here you had it. Missile packs. We had three introduced that launched 5, 7, or 9. You had the Magorga that gave you a nice spread volley of 5 missiles. You had the Kanara that shot 7 in a tighter cluster, and the Karura that shot 9. And then you had extensions called the Funi that shot 4. Now these missiles weren't as strong as like the mid missiles or anything like that. They were weaker missiles altogether, but their swarm capability, I think for some players, they were an attraction point. I had a blast with these. I thought they were a ton of fun. Once people started to get the hang of, the X-Link Kai, with that, we'll talk about this coming up. X-Link Kai with Nexus and playing online a bit. This is one I tended to see a lot. The 7-shot. micro. At least when people were kind of messing and goofing with designs and stuff, and it was a welcome addition, I think, to the missile family too. And obviously, we'd see these carry on through to LR. Now, they didn't really endure, all the way through 4 and Verdict Day and what we have now. But we had a lot of popular categories of parts we long established start to grow even further. Um, and I think despite where they were sitting in terms of weight and drain, they were very drainy, unfortunately. Depending on your design, you might find a good spot for them. You might find a good fit. They were a lot of good options at this point. So,
I just think, can you say Funi again?
Funi,
Funi!
these
Micro missiles.
these extensions as well. They were again to go along with the micro line, very very drainy. But there was some success. I know at least a couple people that I played with enjoyed partnering these instead of with micros with other types of missiles. Now, unfortunately, there were other missiles long running that had been really toned down to almost obscurity at this point. Mainly looking at the Hydra, the multi missile. The multi missile was extremely powerful, especially going back to AC2, but it steadily declined. And there's less missile accuracy, I think. There's one thing I can take out of what some of the missile mechanics that are happening here. We had just, less ability from those. So in some ways, getting more for what you spent, more for your weight and drain, getting a good swarm or getting like a solid lock pattern off, which is worth it. Um, Supplementing a missile pack, you had a ton of options now. If you wanted to go with the heavier hitting missiles or the way you wanted your swarm to connect, tons of options. And I think that really meant something in terms of play. I know the pincer missiles, forgetting the name of them, they launched two that hit you from either side. Those had some really neat applications. If you combine them with certain extensions, or if you wanted to combine them with verts, just options everywhere. That's one thing Nexus was not lacking on. So, but
Yes, no, it was not. But also, sorry, I'm gonna harp on it. It also took some options away. Not a fan of that.
yes, this is true. This is true. But what we have, just looking at things as a sum total and just where the parts were sitting, where we were sitting as a series, um, this was a rough adaptation point for a lot of people. Again, some loved it, as we said earlier, but a lot of people kind of took to this one hard, mainly because of the heat mechanics and everything else and where that's
Right.
set. There's a deep game here. There is still plenty to play and plenty to do, and I think this was one worth persevering. If you got Nexus and you put it down immediately, if you did that, if it's still somewhere in your collection, pick it back up. Go
Uh,
check it out.
I have to take a little bit to what you said there to task. It wasn't just the heat mechanics; it was the fact that Op Intensify was gone.
That
This
too.
this rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I mean, I understand you were never a fan of Op
Nope.
Intensify, if I remember correctly. I mean, I was all right with it. I wasn't a purist on it one way or the other. I
Mm,
understood, um, but this made some people quit. There were people that stopped Armored Core because Op Intensify was gone.
Luke F. Yep.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, that's one notable one, but there was a lot more too. This was a big deal, and Armored or not Armored Core, but From Software is taking a stand here, and I think it was the wrong move.
Mm,
There was no reason to get rid of this. I mean, I think the separation from, your save doesn't have to be human plus or not. I think that was the proper step. I mean, okay, make this something that they can turn on and off, and to take it away altogether, I disagree with it. And I think this is actually Nexus, as great as it is, and it is a great game. You are starting to see From Software make some bad moves with
yeah.
Nexus, at least with the series. And it gets lost in translation a bit because there are so many cool things about Nexus. But I mean, yeah, you really start to see From Software trip a couple times.
And it's kind of neat. At this point, this is when From is still just very bold in their own, decisions. We don't have community surveys coming out for, hey, you want to see this, or, do you would you what would you think if we put this element in the game? No, we were getting Armored Core as they imagine, and as they picture with these things, and not all of these were necessarily popular options. Um, let's also take a look real quick at something that happened lore-wise, just setting up our connection to Last Raven, setting up the future games. At least I thought this was just really weird. And we were talking a little bit about this, how you could transition your file later on from Nexus to Last Raven. The main ending of Nexus, it just baffles me to this day.
Uh,
To this day, and I'm gonna take a second on this one because I couldn't stand it. So taking a look at this ending a second. Okay, just you get to the end of the main campaign of Nexus, and you run into which I want to say this is a translation issue. The supposed nine ball in MT that you deal with.
can we make a note about that, because I know there's other things about this that you want to talk about, but that in itself is noteworthy.
Sure,
The
definitely is.
Okay, so for the U.S. version and maybe some of the others, but you always have to look at the Japanese version
Hmm.
as what it was meant to be. In the Japanese version of the game, the end boss is seen as the name just question marks.
Hmm.
But in the U.S. version, at least, and I think in the UK version as well, he's called Nine Ball.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure if we ever really got an official statement on this. So, that's a big deal, and you have to count that as a nine ball sighting,
yep,
because the Japanese version does not say that it's not. So that's where there was a lot of controversy
yep.
about this. Is this nine ball? And then of course in the next game, nine breaker, there is nine ball. So did H Tech do this themselves,
Right.
or did or was the Japanese just trying to be a little bit quieter about this, whereas they were told from software that, yeah, okay, this is a prototype for nine ball.
Right.
We never find out for sure. But okay, so no, and here we go. And
But yeah,
this is okay. So I mean, this ending, you're gonna gripe about it, and I don't blame you for it. But I mean, I always have a statement to say about these bosses, and this is a cool boss. Okay, this
mhm,
I don't mind so much. It's not a giant superpower thing,
yep,
and that's cool. It isn't. It's not an AC you can make or build, but it feels like it at least follows some of the rules
yeah.
of what the players are restricted to. So this is kind of different. It's a cool boss, in my opinion, but it's what happens after the boss that you're not so
Yeah,
happy about.
that's what I wasn't so big on. A quick note too about the nine ball sighting, slash appearance that we had. It contextually it fits his role. Let's look at what was happening here.
Mhm.
You're sent in by Kisaragi to investigate this like ancient site of technology. It hasn't been visited in years, hasn't been activated in forever, and there was a massive MT that was guarding the tunnel that you dealt with the mission or so before. So it's not the friendliest place. But of course, you're sent in to scout, this facility and to check everything. And once you make it to this unit, Nine Ball essentially seemed to serve the function of a guardian in a lot of ways. When you look at whether you say that's his general function in the old Armored Corps, to keep humanity on the path that it should have been, or to preserve the order. The idea here, he was this version you ran into was this last checkpoint before you could continue again. And I just thought that was kind of neat, just the references and what they point at. They even turned the room red. I mean,
Right.
just kind of funny to see. So, you see some of the characteristic attacks, the pulse, the grenade rounds, and more winks at the past from Never Forget. They tend not to with their old bosses and everything, but you push through, you get through this, and at the end of it, these unmanned suicide weapons activate, swarms and swarms of them, and we're going to assume that the tunnel that you saw them launch from was not the only site, that this was a catastrophic disaster that affected the world. And these things all launch and they swarm out. And the funniest part about this launch is they don't fill up the room that you're in, and your mission's over. There's obviously a lot of confusion. Your operators, really bothered about what's happening, what's going on, and you figure, okay, I'll just go into the next transition, and we'll see what happens from there. Is there another part to this mission, maybe? But no, like things kind of wrap up. Now, what's just beyond me here is, all right, outside, the surface is terrible at this point. Basically, anywhere within any square mile you can imagine is just being bombarded by these suicide weapons, just exploding everywhere. And of all the brilliant plans, you're sent on top of the building to make some dramatic last stand. And it's so strange because it's almost like your operator puts you up to this as though, like, well, we still have to fight. Well, it's great of you to say that. I'm glad, you're comfortable where you are talking to me from said command center. You don't have to be here, for one thing. Second, it makes zero sense why you would fight against a tide like this. And such an odd ending. You basically go on top of this building and just shoot at this endless tide of suicide weapons. You still have control of yourself, but you can't see your AP, your normal gauges, and
Right.
everything else. And as you get low, everything just starts to fade, to fade, to fade, and eventually just completely goes to black. And then you get the credits and whatnot later. And you essentially die in this ending. And of all ways, I said, for goodness sake, like there was so much room for your character, to make that transition to Last Raven with the others that survived. Because we'll talk about this in our later podcast that comes, but we have a number of characters that are set up to go on to the next game in line after Nexus. Not Ninebreaker, no, the story I should say. You have we're going to see Zenitalator, you're going to see Jacko, you're going to see Evangel, a number of others, and it just made no logistical common sense why this had to happen in this specific order, or why you'd even go into something like that. I don't know, but
Well,
it
it
was just
doesn't even
awkward.
make much sense as far as the concept of what you are as a mercenary. It's like, okay, yeah, you were a part of the mission that has released these things onto the world. It
Yep.
wasn't your fault. You were taking, you were doing a mission, and
Right.
you were at least fighting for a greater good. This is not your fault, and I think that's kind of the thing. That's how I see it. Is that they're like, oh, you were there and you saw these things released, and maybe you're responsible, so you need to take action against it. I'd be like, fuck that. Where's my
Nothing.
money, bitch? Let's we're done here.
So, I mean, at that point, I mean, you could see if an AC could turn the tide, because your player, your mercenary, has been put in all kinds of situations where you could succeed, or very difficult things that you could still overcome. This was one of those where you're fighting the sky. Okay, you're gonna run out of ammo, you're gonna run out of AP or something else at some point. This one is just not going to work. This is not some switch you can flip to just end things or just fix it. You can't. And it was almost a result you just had to accept. And as a result of accepting that, it it really made no sense why you had to take part in this to that point. Why you couldn't simply either, well, a stay part of the bunker you were, or go to wherever Zenaida and the smart people went. So
Right,
we'll leave it at
right.
that. But and awkward. Really odd. And we had a couple of other little scenes depending on the route that you took through Nexus. There was a scene when a short CG actually, with Evangel fighting against a massive squad of MTs that just kept advancing over and over. And there was another scene with Evangel marching in a for like a march with a number of other ACs, and these would
Hmm.
pop up depending on your mission path. But an odd ending, to this part of AC, considering everything you'd gone through and everything you'd helped shift. So
I think the proper word that you used was awkward. It was very awkward. It was
yeah,
very odd. And the first time you go through it, you're like, what the hell is going on here?
yeah, exactly. So and that's it's where we wrap with evolution disc. And again, there was plenty of room to go back here if you miss missions, if you wanted to get other parts, if you want to see some other features you might have missed, or get something else in arena. Maybe you didn't beat Iron Low, the freakish tank that came out near the end, or some of the other things. But that was there. That was your option. I think most players at that point, after the end, kind of hopped over to check out Revolution disc if they hadn't already played it, and then
Evolution.
obviously, to jump back between the two. So, but looking at that, all that we've outlined, all that we talked about, the ending, the different disc, this isn't where it stops, though. This is something really important here. Uh, X-Link Kai had just really been introduced to the Armored Core at this point, too. So, if you didn't want this to be the stopping point for you, you didn't have to. If you want to go through the trouble of getting your router and everything hooked up through the third-party software, you could play Nexus Online. And there were hiccups. The idea was to essentially fool two PS2s that they were in the same room together, whereas you'd be playing people from a distance. But this added on some community to things. People could now do some verses. Online you could get some of the forum chat rooms together for people to play, and so we had that new element starting to unlock with the AC community too, which was good to see. And this was just going to continue in Ninebreaker and then in Last Raven. So But
See, I don't remember X-Link Kai for Nexus. I
mhm.
had always played it with Ninebreaker, and then I did a little bit of Last Raven. But yeah, okay, there you go. I mean, and here's the whole thing is, of course, if you're a Japanese player, you don't need this. You get online play because apparently you're a special butterfly, and the rest of the world doesn't get this.
but the the major part of this was, there's still like some hiccups that tended to change, I think, a bit once Ninebreaker and LR hit. It seemed to get fleshed out better, and I think this was a lot of people just not knowing about the option or not quite knowing how to work it or not, because a lot of people got on board with this late. Most, like you're saying, were more into Ninebreaker and LR. There were some that went back, and did some Nexus, and played with that. But it was neat to see this as an option, and next two ACs would have it too. So,
All right,
but all
so
right,
I think that's gonna do it for Nexus.
yeah,
There's a lot there, folks. We certainly jabbered on a lot about a game
yep,
that really changed a lot, but at the same time, hindsight being what it is, showed a lot of what the future would be.
I did.
So of course the next one is Ninebreaker,
Yep.
and the third generation is not going to stop with the controversy. As Ninebreaker is the most worst rated Armored Core to date.
Yes, it
That
is.
being said, if you're an Armored Core fan, you're just fine with this for the most part.
Yep.
You're like, whatever. This is pretty much everything we love. So, of course that doesn't fit for everyone. So it's very weird because at this point, you're really starting to feel the separation as an Armored Core fan to gaming in general
Yep.
with this one. But yeah, that'll be next time. We'll talk about that. But I think that's going to do it for now. That's Armored Core Nexus, and
Good deal.
that's a crazy game, and definitely a lot more than what the surface told you about it.
For sure. So if you still got your copy, maybe go and check it out. Pop in and see where your memory card was sitting if you still have some of your old saves. But we will catch you next time for Ninebreaker. Stay tuned for that. And thank you all for listening. Happy holidays to you. Stay safe. Drive safe if you're traveling. And take it easy. We'll
Well,
talk.
actually, sir, I believe technically at this point, when this is released, the holidays will be over. So I hope you had a happy holiday.
New Year.
Well, okay, I'm sorry.
Take
Yeah,
care,
yeah,
everybody.
Happy New Year. All right, see you guys later.